Hello and welcome to our complete JavaScript course. My name is Lawrence and I'm so excited to have the opportunity to present this course to you today. This course is packed full of amazing examples to get you coding JavaScript. It's all about JavaScript. We're going to be taking you from the very basic fundamental core concepts of JavaScript, building upon those concepts and showing you how to work with JavaScript and really illustrating the power of JavaScript. We've included a lot of exercises, starter projects, and samples examples within this course so that you can get started coding quickly. And I do encourage you to open up your editor and try it out for yourself and see what you can make happen with JavaScript. JavaScript is easy to get started with, and it's also a lot of fun. Making things happen within your web pages and creating that interaction and dynamic content is what JavaScript is all about. This first section is all about the basics of JavaScript. We're going to be showing you how to get started with JavaScript, how to add it into your own web pages, and how to write your very first JavaScript code. So even if you've never written any JavaScript before, this course is going to be perfect to get you started. And this section is going to introduce you to all the fundamental core concepts of JavaScript. And don't forget, help is not far away. If you have any questions or comments, please post them in the Q&A section of this course. I'm always happy to have the opportunity in order to help you out, also to clarify and answer any questions that you may have, creating discussions around the course, topics, and content. I know you're excited to get started, so in the next lesson, let's jump right in and start creating some JavaScript code. In this first lesson, we're going to be showing you how to write JavaScript. So what I've got open right now is brackets. This is the editor that I'm going to be using within this course. And this is the first tool that you're going to need in order to write JavaScript. And you can use any editor. There's a lot of different editors out there. This one is called Brackets. It's free to use. It's available at Brackets.io. It's an Adobe product, and I am going to be using it within this course. If you're interested in using the same one that I'm using, it's available at Brackets.io. And you can go ahead and download it and do the basic install, and that will get you started with an editor. The next tool that we need to render out JavaScript is a browser. And for this course, the browser that I'm going to be using is Chrome. Chrome comes with DevTools, and basically with DevTools, this gives us an opportunity to write and see JavaScript directly within the browser. So it's really important when it comes to editing and working with JavaScript. And especially if you're developing, this is a great resource to have. If you don't have Chrome, Chrome is also free to download. It's available at chrome.com. And if you want to find out more about DevTools, that's available at developer.chrome.com DevTools. And in order to access DevTools, so I'm on a Windows machine, but if you're on a Mac, it's Command-Opt-I, and on Windows machine, it's Control-Shift-I. And what that does is that opens up this little menu at the bottom, and the main tab that we're going to be looking at for most of this course is the console tab. So if you do have Chrome, and if you're watching this video on Chrome, go ahead and open up DevTools. It's installed on every version of Chrome, and go over to the console area of the developer tools. Type in alert and hello. You can also do hello world if you want, and close that off. So with the alert, the rounded brackets, quotes, and then pass yourself a message. So you can do hello world as well and hit enter, and you're going to see that the browser is going to pop up this little message, alert message to you that says hello world. So whatever you're typing in to here is actually what's going to get displayed here. And this is JavaScript. So you can actually run and write your JavaScript directly within your browser and see on any web page. Try it out. Pause the video, open up your browser. If you don't have Chrome, open up Chrome and type in alert, rounded bracket, hello world, and that's your first JavaScript code. In the next lesson, we're going to dive deeper into JavaScript. Welcome back, and in this lesson, we're going to be writing some JavaScript. So the first thing that we need to do is consider where we can write that JavaScript. And that's where an editor comes in. I'm going to be using Brackets, so this is available at Brackets.io. And if you already have an editor that you're comfortable with or familiar with, you can go ahead and use that one. So go ahead, open up your editor, and first of all, we need to create a place to hold that JavaScript. So we have a few options, and we're going to be looking at all three different options that we have in order to write our JavaScript. So we can include it within an HTML file. So I'm going to go ahead and create a brand new HTML file, and I'm going to just call it index. So index.html. So this can serve as our file in order to add JavaScript into it. And when we look at coding, so coding, what essentially it is, it's a set of instructions. We need to pass these instructions over to the browser, and the browser is the one that actually renders out these instructions. So including HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, we don't need a server to render these out. This is all done within the browser. Let's go ahead and set up our HTML template. So we'll start out with our HTML tags, and then within the head, let's add in a title. So again, opening and closing title. And then once you've added those in, next, let's move over to body. And within the body tags, let's set up a div here with hello world. And also just underneath the div, I'm also going to add a button. And I'm going to show you why I'm adding this button afterwards. But let's just do a button, and within the button, we're just going to add some text and do click here or something like that. So this is basic HTML. We notice that we've got opening and closing tags, and then we've got several elements here, and we're ready to go to add JavaScript. So right now, there's nothing new. If you're familiar with HTML, this is just plain HTML. And let's look at how we can add JavaScript into our page. So the first way that we can add JavaScript into our HTML elements is as attributes. So JavaScript can be added as a special HTML element, and this basically triggers some JavaScript. So we just add it in as an attribute, and this one we're going to add in is the onClick. And there's a number of these as well. So there's the onSelect, onChange, onKey press down, on key up. So there's a number of different ones, on drag, on drop, and these all can be added in as attributes, and we are going to be looking at these in more detail as we discuss more about what's available within the document object model. So that's coming up in the latter sections of this course. But for now, it's just important to understand that we do have a way where we can add some basic JavaScript within our elements as an attribute. So now that I've created this special attribute within my HTML, my JavaScript goes in here. And basically, this is essentially the action that's going to happen if this button gets clicked. So now we've set this up, and let's open up our browser. So save the file. This one's called index.html. So this one is available within my folder here. You can place it in any folder, because really at the end of the day, you don't need a server in order to run JavaScript, so you can run it from anywhere. So go ahead, pause the video, and create this first HTML file with some JavaScript in it. And when you come back, let's take a look, and we're going to see how this functions within the browser. So once you've created that, go ahead and click it, and then open it. Open it with any browser you want. Within the course, I am going to be using Chrome, so I'm going to go ahead and open up within the Chrome browser. And I'm going to size it here. So this one as well, I'm going to bring down to half screen so that I can take a look at the source code as well as what's being output within my browser. So we've got our hello world here. So this is just HTML, and we've got our button here. So once we click the button, we're going to see that it fires off some JavaScript. It says hello, and this is a simple Windows object window alert, a built-in function that's ready to go within JavaScript. In the previous lesson, we created some JavaScript and added it into our HTML. Now you're probably looking at this and saying, okay, well, JavaScript should be able to do a whole lot more than this. And you're correct. It can do a lot more. So this is just a simple way to add JavaScript. And usually it's not really a common way to add JavaScript, because for the most part, we do try to separate our JavaScript out of our HTML. So it's easier to read, easier to edit, easier to update, and so on. So you've got a few options to add JavaScript. You can add it via script tags. So these look just like HTML, where we've got an opening and closing script, and then we've got JavaScript in the middle here. So between the script tags where we open and close, this is where all of our content can go. So we can just as easily take this alert, put it in here, and for JavaScript, we need to, or we don't need to, but it's always a good idea to include those semicolons. So I'm going to get rid of that, or actually I can just paste that so I can have JavaScript in a number of areas within my code. So I've got my script tag up here, and I've got it firing off as the page is going to load, so I don't have any event listener that it's listening for. So nothing like what is happening here where we're actually listening for the user to take some type of action. This script is going to just fire off because as the browser reads from top down, it's going to hit the script tags. It's going to know that this part is JavaScript. It's going to see this JavaScript statement, and it's going to just execute that out. So let's refresh the page and see what happens. And there's our hello, and maybe we should distinguish all of these hellos that we're building here. So we'll build hello 2, refresh the page again, and we see now it's this one that's firing off. We've got hello, and we've got to click OK in order to render out the rest of the page. So that's one way to add JavaScript, and this was a second way that we add it within the script tags. Now, a lot of times, commonly, we usually place script tags at the bottom of the page just before the body close. And there's a number of reasons for doing that. And mainly because you want all of your HTML to load, and if you want to access any one of these HTML elements, you do need to have them loaded in order to access them via JavaScript. And we are going to be showing you that as we go through the course as well. So what I want you to do right now is to pause the video and add in JavaScript using the script tags. And pass yourself a message. You can pass your name, enter your name into the alert message, and see it pop up as you refresh your page. So once you've completed that, then I'm going to show you another way to add JavaScript, and this is actually going to be one of the most common ways to add JavaScript. And just one other note before I show you the last way is that sometimes you're going to see where the script tag actually has its own attribute, and it's identified as something like application JavaScript. And basically what this does is this is the meme type. So this helps the Internet Explorer or the Internet browser understand what type of script it should be expecting between the script tags. And I know that I did just say Internet Explorer, and that's because this is for older browsers, and some of the browsers that aren't compatible with the new just script tags, they do need that older type attribute added into them, and most of the time this always reverts back to Internet Explorer. So if you're looking to be backwards compatible, you do need to add in the type, although most of the modern applications, they're not going to include the type if you're just looking at the more modern browsers. But for backwards compatibility, always a good idea to throw that in. So the last type of script, or last way that we wanted to access JavaScript, is as an external file. And this is actually probably the most common way to do this, and this is probably one of the best ways to do that. And the reason being, so I'm going to comment this one out so we don't have too many that are firing off. And this one is going to, initially it's going to look the same, but instead of having our tags between the script tags, we're going to specify a source within the attribute. And then here is where we specify the path to our JavaScript file. And this is also how you could bring in JavaScript libraries like jQuery and so on. So I'm going to just create a file called script.js, and I'm going to link it in the script tags. And basically now, when the page loads, it's actually going to be looking for script.js because it's going to try to render out any of the content located within script.js. So now we need to create script.js. So create a brand new file, and here I'm going to add in alert, and this time I'm going to say hello 3. And we'll just save this, and we called it script.js. So always make sure that your paths are correct. So this one is on the same same directory as my index file, so that's where I'm just linking to it. But if you've got it in a folder or if you've got an external website, then make sure that you're taking care of the linking properly to access that file. So now we can go back to index and we see that what's going to happen is the browser is going to render out all this code. It's going to hit this on click, so it's going to register this click event, so that's going to be ready to go. It's going to read the script JS, so it's going to fire off all of that code. And notice that I don't have to wrap it within the script tags because this is a JS file, meaning it's a JavaScript file, and it's understood that it's a JavaScript file, and I am linking to it from the script tags as well. So basically that's a link, and over here I've commented out the alerts, so I'm not going to get that hello 2 firing off. And now let's go back out into a browser, refresh the page, and we're going to see hello 3 is firing off. So there's a lot of reasons for using external files, and the main one is that they're reusable, that you can link to the same JS file from one HTML file or 1,000 or 10,000. It doesn't matter. You can link to it from multiple ways, and this really provides a lot of flexibility in your application because you can open this up and you can make a change and have it reflect across your entire website or any of the pages that are actually linking to this JS file. And the other benefit is that you're able to separate out your JavaScript from your HTML. And that's why I said that normally you don't see a lot of this anymore because we're trying to separate out writing script in the HTML as much as possible. And if we can bring this out and include it into an external script file, then if we do need to add in our JavaScript, we know exactly where to go and where to look for it. Otherwise, it does get a little bit complex because we have to sift through a whole bunch of HTML, and in this case there's not a lot here, but in some cases you will run into a lot of HTML, and it does become difficult to really sift through it and make good use of it. So those are the 3 ways that you can add JavaScript into your page, and they all have their own benefits. And normally if you're writing a lot of script or if you're reusing your JavaScript, keep it in an external script file. If you do have some JavaScript, if you're doing a one-page site, or if you've got some simple code that's just reflective on the HTML that you have on the one page, then you can add it in as a script file or in between the script tags. This will make it load a little bit faster because it's going to have less server requests than loading another external file. And then lastly, if you have no other choice, you can add it in as a click event or an attribute within the element. So what I want you to do now is to open up your editor and use that same alert function that we used within this lesson and try it out for yourself. So add it in as an attribute, add it in as a script within your file, within your HTML file, and then lastly, add it in as a separate JS file and link to it within your HTML. Try it out and pass yourself some interesting messages. And in the next lesson, we're going to be jumping into DevTools, and I'm going to show you a little bit more about how we can use DevTools within our development process. So that's coming up in the next lesson. Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to be writing some more JavaScript code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that script.js file that I opened up earlier, and I'm actually going to close off index. I'm going to work off of that script.js file. So we know that from our previous lesson that we linked our file, we've got them on the same directory. So make sure as well when you're linking to the JS file that depending on where the file is located, that you've got the proper path. So it might not always be the case that you're doing the JavaScript the same level as you're doing your index page. So make sure that if you've got scripts folder or if you've got some other folders on your site that you're properly linking to it, as well as if you're linking to an external library, then make sure that you're also creating that correct path, or you've got the absolute path to get to that file so you're not throwing any errors. So this is always a good idea to create some type of simple JavaScript that's visible so you know that you're actually connected to the JavaScript. So now I've opened up that script.js file and I'm ready to start typing some JavaScript. And we know that the file is somewhere down here at the bottom. And earlier we saw how we can type alert, and we can, whenever we load the page, we see that this JavaScript fires off and we get this alert message happening and showing up within the page. And basically it says, this page says hello again. So I'm going to show you some more tips about writing JavaScript as well as how JavaScript works. So another thing that we can do with JavaScript, we can also write information to the web page. And this is a really big part of JavaScript because this gives us the way, an ability to actually interact with our web page content. And now when I refresh the page, we get that hello message, but we also have hello world written down here at the bottom. So notice that wherever that script tag is, that's linked to this script.js file is located, that's where within our HTML our content gets written out. So basically, it's not a great way to write out content onto your web page by doing document write. I just want to show you that this is one of the ways that we can typically create some type of dynamic content being generated within our web page. And it could be as simple as this, that we're just adding some content that's not actually existing within the source code, and after the page loads, runs the JavaScript, then that content gets added. So another thing that you might have noticed, if you're looking really closely, you can see that I've got double quotes here, I've got single quotes down here. And really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which quotes you're using. You can use single, you can use double. And that actually just did a double quote with a single, so that's why I had to remove that. But this will work the same way, and when we render out the page, we see the hello again. So either way, if you're writing with single or double, you're free to use either one as long as you're encapsulating those string characters. So if you didn't write those quotes, then JavaScript actually would throw an error because it wouldn't actually know what to do with that. So we see that we're not actually getting that information being output there, and that's because we've got an error. So we're actually missing some information between the argument list, and we are going to talk more about that in the upcoming lesson when we talk about console log and debugging. So we know that this isn't proper, and JavaScript doesn't like that when it's rendering out, so it throws an error. So now I've updated that, I've fixed that. We can go back to our page, and now again we'll see that our page loads. So this is another important thing to note, that when I had an error in my JavaScript, we noticed that it didn't actually render out the alert because the JavaScript threw an error and it stopped executing the code. So once you have an error or there's something that JavaScript just can't make out what it needs to do with that command, then it's going to stop executing the code. So always keep that in mind, that if you're going to your web page and something isn't happening that you've got in your JavaScript and you don't know why, that's where you open up the console, and if you're throwing an error, you're going to see that within the console. So another thing about JavaScript is that I can have a number of white space here, and when I reload the page, it doesn't actually make any difference. So JavaScript ignores the white space, and it doesn't actually matter to the JavaScript if I've got my code like that, although it's a lot harder to read when you're a web developer or when you're coming in. So it's not really advisable that you add all of this white space in, but for demonstration purposes, it really doesn't matter to the browser where this spacing is, or if you're adding in tabs. So you can add in tabs as well. You can move your content in and out, and tabs are usually used for writing neater code. So typically we do it in a branching type structure where we have our main JavaScript statements, and then if we've got a function or a loop and we've got some additional code running in those, and I am going to talk about those in the upcoming lessons, but if you've got any of those and you've got more code running in there, then we indent just to make it more readable. So web developers typically will use the ability for JavaScript to create spacing to make it more readable. And there's also a concern for JavaScript when it's minified, and when the JavaScript code is minified, basically what that means is that it's getting rid of all the excess white space and making the file size smaller and allowing it to load quicker. But when you're starting out, you don't have to worry about that, and the main thing is that your code is readable and that you can go through the code and you can consume that code in a fairly easy manner. The other thing with JavaScript, you notice that at the end of each line, I've got these semicolons. So the JavaScript itself, it will still run without the semicolons, but we do use those, so they are optional, but it's another one of those really good coding practices that once you've created your statement, you put a semicolon in there just so that we know that this is the end of this particular command. And JavaScript really is about creating all of those commands and those instructions on how to do something. And once we're able to really isolate out these instructions, so this would be step 1, this would be step 2, to render out all of that content. And that's where we use the semicolons to visibly divide those steps. So what do you think of JavaScript so far? It's really easy to start writing the code, as we've seen. It's also really easy to do something with just some simple lines of code. So it can do quite a bit, which is already built into JavaScript. With just 1 or 2 lines of code, you can already have something happening within your web page. And that's really the beauty of JavaScript, because that simplicity of that code and that lightweight ability for that code to render out directly within your browser is really important, because this gets you started with JavaScript really quickly, and you can do a whole lot with just a little bit of code. So what I want you to do now is to open up your JS file and try writing the document right. Write yourself a nice, interesting message, refresh your page, and see it get rendered out within your HTML. And the next lesson, we're going to go into looking at debugging, because as we saw earlier, that JavaScript can actually tell if there's an error. And although JavaScript is very flexible, and it's made to be very flexible when it's rendering out that code, and very forgiving, I should say, as it's rendering out that code, it does run into some errors, and those errors can really easily be read within the console, and this gives us the ability to debug and fix those errors. And there's also a way to communicate from our code into the console, so as you're developing the application, you can pass some information. So all of this is coming up in the next lesson. Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to be looking at console log and how we can use console log in order to debug applications and also find out more information about what's happening with our script as it's being executed out. So one of the reasons that I like to use Chrome is because it's got the ability to access DevTools. Now, DevTools comes available in every version of Chrome. So if you have Chrome installed on your computer, you can access DevTools. If you're on a Mac, you can do Command-Opт-I. If you're on a Windows machine, it's Control-Shift-I. And both of those, when you've got your browser open, you can open up DevTools, as well as you can go into the top right-hand browser menu here, and you can select Tools and DevTools, and you can also open it that way. If you're on a Windows machine, you can go and right-click anywhere on the page, click Inspect, and you can open them up that way as well. So a number of different ways to open up DevTools. And this is why I really like to use Chrome, because DevTools is a really super useful tool. And it's going to give us the ability to send those console messages and be able to read them and pick them up. And console messages, the way they work is they give us the ability to pass some information from our script into the console. And the console is not actually meant to be seen by the average web user. It's meant for developers and for debugging purposes. So if you've opened up your DevTools, you can see that there's a number of tabs here at the top, and just go over to the second tab here, which is called Console. You do have some additional options for your DevTools where you can dock it to the left. You can also dock it to the right-hand side. You can dock it to the bottom. And in my case, what I'm doing is I'm just outputting it in a separate window. So now that we've got DevTools open, let's open up our editor and we're going to type some JavaScript code. And the JavaScript that we're going to be typing is going to be just simple output messages that we're going to be able to pick up within the console itself. Now the console is super useful when you're debugging your applications or if you just want to find out some more information about what's happening within your script. So in this case, we're going to just send ourselves a simple message of hello world, and this is going to be executed within our script and we're going to see it output within the console. So when I refresh the console, I can see that I've got hello world being output and I've got the line where the code is being executed. I also have the file and the file path of where that code is being executed. And this is again where it becomes really useful because you know at what point this variable is being output. So if you wanted to log something as the code is being executed, this is the place to do it and this is the way to do it. You can also, another really nice thing about the console is once you've got this open in your DevTools, you can actually type in different JavaScript statements and they actually get executed out within your console. So I can type in something like console log, and this is going to be the same thing as typing it here within the script, except it's just getting executed out within this instance of the open browser. If I refresh it, this console log here is going to be gone, whereas my script is always going to execute out. So that's what the big difference here is. But this gives us really easy access to write JavaScript statements and have them output directly within our console, and we can see what the output is going to be. So we know that when we type console log, our output is going to be hello, and that's what's going to get displayed within the console tab of our browser. So what I want you to do now is pause the video, try it out for yourself. Go ahead and open up Chrome and then browse over to the console tab and type in console log and type yourself a nice interesting message and see what happens. And then once you complete that, then you can go ahead and open up your editor and type in that same code or something different, maybe another interesting message to yourself within your editor, save the page, and open up your DevTools and see the message being displayed within the console tab. Try that out, pause the video, try it out for yourself, get comfortable with using the console because we are going to be using it quite a bit within this course, and it does become really useful as you're debugging your code and you're working with JavaScript. So I hope you got a chance to try that out, and I really do want you to become really comfortable with using the console because we are going to be using it throughout this course. So let's try something else. So we saw that we can type in a string message within the console and we can see it gets shown here as the string is being output. We can also do some math here. So if we want to do 4 plus 6, we can see that when we refresh the page, we get the value of 10 being output. So what's happening here is that when JavaScript comes to this statement, it knows that we're outputting some content within the console and it encounters the two numbers and it says, okay, well, we've got 4 plus 6. So it renders out that arithmetic and sends it within the console, and we can see the computed value of 4 plus 6 being shown within our window. So now let's have some more fun with JavaScript. So we saw that we can output console log. So there's a few other things that we can output as well to make it a little bit more interesting and a little bit more colorful. So one of the ways that we can use console log is actually not use console log at all, and we can output console errors. So basically this simulates outputting an error message into our console. So for whatever reason, if we want to output error or the word error at a certain point as our script is being executed out, we can see that that gets rendered out. So line 16, we're outputting an error message within the console, and this is what the contents of that message are. So we can do some other things as well within the console. So we can do a warning message, and basically similar to the error message, basically it sends us a warning message out into the console. And so this one is not as strong as the error, but it also is great to get people's attention or developers' attention. So if there's something in particular within your code that you want to be able to maybe come back to, or if there's a bug there that you want someone to take a closer look at, this is a great way to really isolate out what's happening within that code and pass a message out within the console. So another thing that we can do within our console is we can make it even more colorful. So I did say that console log can maybe get a little bit boring if we're just outputting this black text and the numbers are blue. We can also enhance this by adding a little bit of styling in it. So this is going to work in the same way that CSS does. So we do the percentage sign and we do C. And basically what that is doing is that's telling the statement as it's being executed out that we've got some CSS that's attached to it. And the format for doing this is going to be exactly the same as you would expect when you're typing CSS. So if we want hello world to be green, we can change hello world to be green just by doing the percentage sign C, and then whatever CSS we want to add in there, we could do there as well. So let's try something else out as well, and we can really have quite a bit of fun with this. And again, this is just really useful stuff as you're outputting information within the console. So for whatever reason, if you want to have a little bit of color within your output, you can really easily do that by, we can do maybe color yellow, and let's do background. So instead of a background of white, let's do black background. So now we've got hello world is going to be output in yellow with a black background, and we can see that it gets rendered out within the console within that format that we've indicated. So I do encourage you, try it out for yourself, as it is really important to become familiar with working within the console, and all of these messages that we're passing back and forth are going to become more apparent, and we're going to see the use of them as we progress through the course. It's really important to understand that debugging is one of the things that you need to do as a developer on a regular basis, and having the tools there on the ready in order to do that debugging is an essential part of developing applications. In the next lesson, we're going to be taking this one step further, and we're going to be looking at comments. And comments is another way that we can have some additional information within our coding in order to utilize it as we develop out our coding. So that's coming up. Earlier we saw how we can use the console for debugging, and now let's look at some more ways to pass some information to other web developers or even to ourselves for debugging or for just documenting and commenting purposes. So we see that within our editor, we've got a couple lines of code here. So we've got document write, we've got alert. And let's say, for instance, I don't want alert to keep showing up. So I find this little pop-up box every time I load my page. It's getting really annoying, and I don't want to run this particular statement. So the easiest way to get rid of it, but also keep it within my code, because you never know, just in case later on I might want to have that back in my code. So I don't want to completely just delete it and then have to figure out how to write it again. I just wanted to comment that out. So now when I refresh my page, we see that the document writes the page, and I am refreshing the page. So what's happening right now is that alert simply isn't firing off. And if I do the same thing here for the document write, so this is just 2 forward slashes, and that gives me the ability to comment out the code, and brackets is doing a great job here of graying out that information, because basically what this means is that we're not actually writing out that information. So let's say, for instance, I've got quite a bit of code. So I've got a bunch of these hello worlds, and all of a sudden I realize, well, I don't need 5 hello worlds repeating, and I want to get rid of some of them. So there's a way to comment out multiple lines. So I could just as easily go like this, comment it out, but there's another way to do that, and that is with the same forward slash, but doing the asterisk. And then once you've gone through and you're satisfied that this is the chunk of code that I wanted to comment out, then you just do it in backwards format where you do the asterisk and the forward slash. And we see that brackets graze this information out. And actually what I'm probably going to do is maybe I can move it even on top there. So this gives us an easy way to block out chunks of code. And you'll see this used as well for multiple comments or instructions. So I want to give myself credit about something, or I want to, I don't want to forget, so don't forget to say hello, or maybe we can say don't forget to say goodbye. So this would just be some additional information within our code that we can be going through, and all of a sudden we see that, okay, well, we've added this here, and there's a reason that we've added this in, that we should say don't forget to say goodbye. So we've said hello, and we also want to say goodbye. So another way to add comments in is to do it after the statement. So you'll see this as well. So if it's pertaining for a particular line of code, so over here we want to say goodbye, change to goodbye. So you can make notes about your code, and this gives you the ability when you revisit it later to see what you were thinking at the time. And if you're going through a bunch of logic, sometimes it's not beneficial to jump to something else and then go back. What you want to do is quickly comment something, make note of it, and be able to retrieve that same line of thinking later on. So now I know that even if I was to close this file up, if I came back a week, a month, 2 years later, I know that I still had to change this to goodbye. So I've got multiple messages here to myself, and this again, this is not showing up within the browser, so it's not going to be visible within the browser. And now when I open this up 2 years later, I know that I can change it to goodbye. And I can refresh the code, and now it's been changed to goodbye. And at that point, if I've already completed the changes, the way that I usually do this is that if I've made a note and if I want to make a change, after I've made the note, I can get rid of that. So I can get rid of those comments and continue on with my code. So that's usually how I do it, and you can use these comments in a number of different ways to benefit within your programming. So what I want you to do now is to open up your JavaScript file and create some comments. So all you have to do is either slash it or slash asterisk asterisk slash and add in some information. Maybe write down your thoughts of what you want to do within the application so that you know that next time you open up that file, you know what you want to do within that code. So the next lesson, we're going to be working through what we've learned in the previous lessons with a JavaScript exercise where we're going to create an HTML page and we're going to add some JavaScript to that page. So that's coming up in the next lesson. Congratulations on making it to the end of this section. This lesson is going to be all about applying what we've learned in the previous lessons and taking some action and making things happen using JavaScript. So we're going to be creating an HTML file as well as a JS file or JavaScript file. So that's going to be the first action that I want you to take within this exercise. So create both of these files, and of course that HTML file, it doesn't have to be very elaborate. It can be a very simple HTML template, and then the JavaScript file, always remember that you just need to call it .js. So the HTML, as the HTML is .html, the JavaScript is .js. So the next thing is I want you to apply some JavaScript into that HTML. And I want you to set up and output a welcome message to the page. So something that says welcome to the page. Next, have a pop-up that says hello. And then lastly, output information into the console that the code actually worked and ran. And if you want to get really creative, make sure you add in some comments along the way on your thoughts and notes as the script is being executed out. So go ahead, pause the video, and I'm going to show you the solution starting up next. So I hope you had an opportunity to try out this exercise, because it is really important when you're learning JavaScript to try it out for yourself and get familiar with the syntax that we're using in order to write code. So now I'm going to show you the solution. So the first thing was to create an HTML and a JavaScript file, and I actually am cheating a little bit because I already have an HTML and a JavaScript file, but you can go ahead and make sure you do create these on your own system. So next step was to add a welcome message that prints out the HTML file. So what we need to do is we need to link our JavaScript file to our HTML. And the way that we're going to do that is using the script tag. And we need to specify the source. So wherever your JS file is located, make sure that you're linking to that file. Next, we want to specify the type. And as mentioned earlier, this is something that you don't necessarily need to do, but you can include for the older browsers so that they can to also render out this as JavaScript. But as we know, modern browsers, it's not necessary. So now save that index.html, and now you can go over to your JavaScript file. So open that up. And the first order of business was to write a welcome message that prints out in the HTML. And we saw that we can do that using document write. And although as you progress through this course, I'm going to show you a much better way to do this. But for now, let's do something like welcome to my site and close that off with a semicolon. And the next thing that we want to do is we want to maybe add in some comments, add pop-up message. And next we want to do over here, we want to add in console message. So those are the two actions that we still need to undertake. So now let's go into the pop-up message. And the way that we did that was with the alert function. So we wanted to just have an alert that said hello. So we can go ahead and type that in out there. And then lastly, let's actually refresh the page and see how far we've got with all of the action items. We see we've got the hello message. We've got welcome to my site. So lastly, we want to be able to take a look within the console, and we want to have another message out there that it actually worked and it ran. So basically, we didn't run into any errors and everything went smoothly. So I'm going to type out it worked. And then we'll go back out, refresh the browser, and open up that console, and we see that we've got the last action item, it worked, being displayed within our console log. So do try it out for yourself, experiment a little bit, try out different syntax and different ways of bringing the code into your HTML. Try it all out, what you've learned in the previous lessons, and the upcoming section is going to get a whole lot more interesting because I'm going to show you the real power of JavaScript. So that's coming up in the next section.